One of the best tools you can use with young kids is called a beaded number line. This is a really simple version of it I made with things I found around the house. I used some paper clips, I used a piece of string, and I used some beads in 2 different colors. And the object is to have your child make 10 with 2 different color of beads. So 5 of one color and then 5 of another color. If you don't have colored beads at home, I would suggest things like different colors of Fruit Loop cereals to build the beaded number line. Or you can even make your own paper beads by rolling up strips of paper in different colors. Eventually you want to move them on to a longer version of that, the beaded number line that goes from 0 to 100. So one of the best ways to do that, again, is to build them in groups of 5 so that they can start to see these as sets of 5 eventually. First, they'll want to count each one, but eventually they'll start to see that 5 and 1 more makes 6, and 5 and 2 more makes 7, and so forth. And then eventually we want them to start seeing the 2 5s make the 10. So you can see that I could skip count this by 5s, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, and so on. Or I could see these 2 colors as being worth 10 and count by 10. So 10, 20, 30, and so on. The most advanced version of this beaded number line would be building in groups of 10. So this one also has 100 beads in it, but instead of grouping them in 5s, I've grouped them into 10s so that they start to see this whole yellow unit as 10 and this whole blue unit as 2 10s and so forth. So I can count it as 1 10, 2 10s, 3 10s, and so forth up to 100. This is going to be really good for building an understanding of place value. So I might say to my child, can you show me where 12 would be? And they would start to think about that as being 110 and 2 more. Or I could say, where's 20? And they'd see that as 2 10s. Or I could say, where's 22? And they could see that as 2 10s and 2 more. Another tool that's really great for that is a simple clothespin, because they can actually mark off the numbers that you're looking for along the number line. And finally, we can transition them into a more standardized number line. Now, this is called an open number line because I only have marked off some of the numbers. So I have a 0 and I have 100. And then we start to build the number line together. Can you show me where 10 of those would be? If your paper's long enough, you can actually line them up to the beads and have the child mark off where 10 would be, where 20 would be, and so forth. But eventually we want them thinking logically. Like if we've used the number line beads a number of times, we can start to thinking about, well, where would half of that be? Well, half of that would be about here. And what is half of 100? It would be 50 beads. And what would be half of that? Half of that would be 25, and so forth. So they start to build an idea of how number lines work. Number lines are foundational for all the mathematics they're going to be doing through elementary and then on into middle and high school when they start using number lines with integers. In some of my other videos, I'll be talking about ways we can use things like the beaded number line to help kids make sense of greater than and less than, to help them make sense of decimals, because we can use it in such a varied and flexible way. So one of the ways might be just marking off numbers and playing guess my number. So I've marked off 10, 20, 30, and I've also marked off 40, 50, 60, 70, and 80. So I've used some clothespins, and I might play a game like this. My number is more than 30, but it's less than 80. Can you guess my number? And your child could ask some questions, and you can give yes or no answers. They might say, is it an even number? Is it an odd number? Is it more than 50? Is it less than 70? And every time they make a guess, you can mark off different places. So those are just some ideas of ways that you can use the number line. When your students get older, as they go through school by around 4th and 5th grade, they're going to start using things like the beaded number line and then a regular number line to think about decimals. So we've been thinking about these in whole numbers. This is being 1, and this is being 2, and this is being 100, and this is being 99. But we can also think about this whole string as being 1 unit, and this is 0, and this is 1. And we can think about all the parts or the fractions or the decimal fractions that make that up. So 1 bead would be 1 out of 100, or 1/100th of the whole. We could think about these 10 beads as being 10 1/100ths of the whole, or we could think about it as being 1/10th of the whole, because we have 10 groups of 10. So 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10, 10/10, or 1 whole. And we can ask students as they get older to start to look for numbers with decimals. So can you show me 22/100ths? And they could see that as 1/10, 2/10, and 2/100ths, and mark it off as so, like they did with the whole numbers. Or they could see it as 22 separate beads out of the 100. So we could call it 22/100ths is the same as 2/10 and 2/100ths. So you can see that using the beaded number line with your pre-K, first and second grade and kindergarten students can be really foundational for helping them understand decimals and decimal fractions later on in elementary school. I think you can see why the beaded number line is one of my favorite tools to use right from the get-go. If your child is not quite ready in preschool to use beaded number lines yet, you might just start with some number paths. There are some great games out there for working on moving along a number path, like Chutes and Ladders, for example. Any kind of game board that allows kids to move from one to the next starts to build the idea of how number lines work. And then we can move them into the beaded number lines and then into number lines on paper. So thanks for stopping in, and I'll see you next time.